The Ptolemaic kings of Egypt aimed to create a universal archive. They sought to capture every piece of human knowledge, building a collection that exceeded the scope of any previous royal library. This ambition was backed by an aggressive, state-funded acquisition policy. The kings issued a mandate for searching arriving ships and confiscating any original texts found on board. These originals were kept for the archive, while the owners received only a copy in return. This operation was headquartered at the Mouseion. It functioned as an ancient think tank, where international scholars received tax-exempt status, free meals, and salaries to spend their lives curating and translating the growing collection. The Library of Alexandria was a massive, state-funded machine designed to systematically monopolize global information. In the popular narrative, this archive met a sudden end. A single, devastating fire supposedly burned the building to the ground, erasing centuries of scientific and literary work. However, the historical record contains a massive contradiction. Primary sources assign the blame for this crime to 3 different leaders across 3 different centuries: a Roman general, a Christian bishop, and a Muslim caliph. The destruction of the library is not a settled historical fact. To find out what actually happened, we have to look closer at each of these reported events. In 48 BC, Julius Caesar became embroiled in a naval siege at Alexandria. To protect his outnumbered forces, Caesar ordered his men to set fire to the Egyptian fleet in the harbor. Ancient writers like Seneca and Plutarch claim that the wind fanned these flames from the docks to nearby houses and warehouses, allegedly destroying tens of thousands of books in the process. Decades after this harbor fire, the geographer Strabo toured the city and recorded that the scholars of the Mouseion were still living and working there. Mark Antony also later gifted Cleopatra 200,000 scrolls taken from the library at Pergamum. This political gesture was large enough to restock any losses incurred during the Roman siege. While Caesar's military tactics caused collateral damage along the wharves, the library and its scholars survived the Roman Civil War. In the late 3rd century, Alexandria suffered through brutal urban sieges under the emperors Aurelian and Diocletian. These conflicts heavily damaged the royal quarters where the main library was located. However, a second collection, a daughter library, was housed safely in the nearby Serapeum Temple. This temple stood until 391 AD, when Bishop Theophilus oversaw a Christian mob that pulled down the structure. This chart compares the ancient claim of 700,000 destroyed scrolls against the estimated total output of known Greek authors. The math is questionable. For 450 known authors, averaging 50 scrolls each, their combined output remains a tiny fraction of the 700,000 cited. Periodic fires and religious riots caused severe localized damage, but the numbers suggest these events could not have erased the entirety of the ancient world's written knowledge. Shifting focus away from acts of violence reveals a different cause: centuries of systemic neglect. Papyrus is extremely fragile. Over hundreds of years, coastal humidity, mice, and moths slowly wore down the collection. The institution also faced political defunding. When Ptolemy VIII purged intellectuals from the city and removed their tax-exempt status, the active curation and physical maintenance of the texts largely stopped. By the 4th century, the transition from the papyrus scroll to the parchment codex, the early bound book, further isolated the old collection. Transcribing thousands of aging pagan scrolls into the new, expensive parchment format required massive investment. Faced with the high cost of manual transcription, many older works were simply abandoned. The library's decline was a slow process of political indifference and technological obsolescence. By the late 4th century, historical records described the once great royal quarter as an uninhabited wasteland. While the historical record focuses on dramatic stories of fires and mobs, the physical evidence reveals a much slower, quieter decay. This history suggests that information does not survive by default. Preserving knowledge is an active process. The loss of the library proves that a society's history can disappear as soon as it is no longer considered worth the cost of maintenance.